and welcome everyone to Your Health Reclaimed. This is your host, DrPND, and I'm really happy to be back again with another podcast. And today we're going to talk about UPFs, or ultra-processed foods. Now, this is not a new topic. This topic has been talked about, I'm sure, thousands of times on podcasts, YouTube, other social media, and so forth. It's been written probably by the millions. However, as much as it has been talked about, written about, agreed upon by pretty much everyone, at least to a large extent, it still becomes, still is a very, very big problem for everyone in our country and pretty much in a lot of the westernized countries in the world. And the reason being is because ultra-processed foods are the number one reason for our health crisis, at least in our country, when it comes to chronic disease, things like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, hormonal issues, you name it. That is hands down the number one overall arching reason for our sad state of health. As of 2017 statistics, I'm sure things have drastically increased by now. At least 60% of the population in the United States had one or more chronic diseases, and that is not good. I mean, we're a very advanced, phenomenal, powerful country with great technology, great resources, and we should not be having problems, with chronic disease to this level that we have. So, even though, again, everybody knows about processed foods, or ultra-processed foods, I should say, this continues to be a problem. I don't believe there's a single person who is a viable, normal adult in this country that if they're approached and asked if junk food and ultra-processed foods, things like Coke and Pepsi and Twinkies and other garbage, frankenfoods that I call them, are good for you, I don't believe anybody would ever say, oh, they're great for you. Yeah, they're very nutritious and they're really good for you and there's no problem with them. No, there's not a single person. I can tell you, in doing this for 27 years, I've never encountered anybody, clients, patients, never, that anybody has ever even had the audacity to even, slightly agree on the fact that processed foods, of highly refined processed foods are good for you. Everybody knows they're not. Some people understand more than others, but nonetheless, everybody knows that they are not healthy for you. There's not even people that actually believe that they're okay to eat. They're pretty much neutral. So with that being said, I really want to talk about the damaging effects of those and ultimately the 5 characteristics that really make them harmful. A real quick history. We're not going to get into that. I'm going to do a whole other podcast on the processing of foods, especially among the more dangerous, one of them being the industrial seed vegetable oils. And aside from that, I just want to give a quick history of when they began. In this country, the processing of food began in the mid-1800s, not mid-1900s, mid-1800s. Okay, so we're almost going on, 200 years, give or take. And that is a problem because even though they're not really popular or, in much use, relatively speaking, they began their processing and little by little they began to find themselves, in the markets and food supply for consumption for food, with people. And fast forward to about 1905, back then what's called FDA, the Food and Drugs of America, the board of directors, there was a gentleman named Harvey H. Wiley. Him and a few of his colleagues were among the first recorded ones to begin to openly, publicly speak against the use of processing of foods. Now, Harvey, and his colleagues were actually medical doctors who sat on the board of directors. I believe he was the head of the board of directors of the, back the FDA. And they started warning people very sternly, the board and just the companies themselves, and eventually people, that the chronic, continual, regular consumption of all those ultra-processed foods problems are going to begin happening, and health issues are going to start to happen. And they were happening because they themselves, being medical doctors, already start to see actual issues and damage from those processed foods. So initially they were speculating properly, and then eventually they started to actually really write about openly and really speaking openly, because they, in their practices, they began to see the patterns and the issues of processed foods. In 1938, the gentleman passed away, but he wrote a book that is still available online. Actually, there are photocopies of the book, and it really documents the whole process and his whole journey of how he and his colleagues were, trying to fight the, food processing companies back then, which even back then they were pretty powerful. They got ousted actually out of the board. They were dismissed and ousted out of the board, being, the board director, and out of the board permanently. And their colleagues also ridiculed them. And the big reason for that was because, they were not willing to take bribes, and they were not willing to take, be silent. And they wanted to speak the truth, because there was definitely issues. So we're talking back in 1905, and then all the way up until his death in 1938. Think, people like, Harvey H. Wiley and his colleagues openly spoke out. After that, the baton was taken by a gentleman known as Dr. Royal Lee. He's actually the guy that started the process, among the first people to have one of the really good, high quality, whole food based vitamin and supplement and mineral companies that, to this day, it's a great company, going very strong. And there were many, many other, what do we call, nutritional pioneers, and people that really kept speaking out against the processed food industry, which, again, even back then was very powerful. The advent of processing of foods was a good meaning, in a sense that, they're shelf stable, you can carry them for a long time. Also, often they don't need refrigeration of any kind, because back then they didn't have refrigeration. And also, they're very profitable. World War II especially drastically advanced the uses of processed food on many levels, which I'm not going to go into that right now. But when everything settled down and was not about survival, was not about, make sure that we have, enough food in famines or wars or stuff like that, the ultimate reason was really well exposed, and that is because processed foods are extremely profitable. If you don't believe me, go to any grocery store in the United States of America, or anywhere really, and you're going to see that aside from the produce department and the meat and seafood department, and dairy and eggs, everything else is packaged and is located in the center aisles. And this is where the money is. This is where all the processed foods, whether they're cereals, whether they're cookies and Twinkies, pretzels, whatever kind of garbage they have, it's all there. You can see the vegetable oils like lesson oil, there's canola oil, soybean oil, peanut oil, you name it. And they're there for months, if not years, when they're bought, because they have a phenomenal shelf stability. So the profitability of ultra refined foods, processed foods, is what ultimately caused, and still the cause, of these foods being very prevalent. All right. So I'm going to talk about, again, 5 characteristics that really make them harmful, and some other additional information that I believe you guys will find useful. Real quick, I have a really good small fact. So the epidemic of modern heart disease, as a fact, 1921, okay, 103 years ago, was the first officially recorded myocardial infarction in the USA. Okay, so first recorded myocardial infarction in the US. 1930, 9 years later, okay, there was 3,000 US deaths and officially recorded. They were officially recorded for myocardial infarction. 1960, 30 years from there, was a little over 500,000 US reported official deaths from myocardial infarction. And this was taken from a medical journal way back, I believe, the 70s or early 80s fact. And it is amazing. And I don't have to tell you, you guys can do your own research. All you have to do is go to American Heart Association, Medical Association, National Institute of Health, World Health Organization, you name it, whatever. You're going to find very similar statistics. And those statistics are staggering. And you talk to any cardiologist, and probably perhaps even any, pertinent, prudent physician, U.S. physician, they're going to tell you that heart disease is the number one, if not very close to number one killer in the United States. And the primary reason for that, aside from, physical damage, defects, congenital defects, or anything like that, is from chronic heart disease that develops from poor lifestyle choices. And the primary driver of that is ultra-processed foods. So this is just like a quick fun fact, put things in perspective. Here we go. Characteristic number one that make ultra-processed foods harmful, well, is the high fat, sugar, and salt content in those foods that hijack actually our brain's reward system, leading us to almost irresistible urge for more. You don't believe me? Try to stop eating processed food and see what happens. You're going to be jonesing like a fiend without fail. Every single client back today and every single patient that I work with, they're trying to address lifestyle issues and other, diseases that they're trying to deal with. It is amazing how hard it is for them to stop eating processed food and completely eliminate it. Okay, it is addictive, and they go through a withdrawal. Some people cannot even handle it, and they just cannot handle any kind of program to be able to, address their health issues, because they just cannot stay away from processed food. It is severely addictive. Okay, often people, tell me, well, I'm really missing carbs, and I'm like, you're not missing carbs because your meal plan has plenty of healthy starch things from, oatmeal, amaranth, quinoa, sweet potatoes, rice, and many different healthy complex starches. And yet it's not enough because they're not craving carbs, they're craving the processed foods. And a big part of that comes directly from the, sugar and also the refined white flour. Okay. And there's no way around that. There's nothing you can do to substitute processed food. You just have to go to the withdrawal. No different than alcoholism, try to stop drinking, no different than trying to stop smoking or to stop, doing drugs. The addiction is a very similar pattern. In some cases, I'm willing to bet is even stronger because, if you want to stop drinking, you're going to stop going to a bar, perhaps, stop going to, a liquor store or anywhere there's easily available alcohol. Processed food is everywhere. If you want to do even a garden project at home, which is obviously healthy in of itself outside in the fresh air, sunshine, you go to Home Depot, get some supplies, you check out the line, you're lined up with junk food. Anywhere you go, on every corner, multiple avenues of processed food from the fast food restaurants and so forth. So it's very hard, and I can vouch for that. And that is hands down the single biggest problem that clients face is being able to stop eating processed food. Okay, because they're severely addicted to it. Okay, let's go to number two. Second characteristic that make those things very harmful. Well, they actually contain very harmful additives. Hundreds of unregulated chemicals, as you guys know, are added to ultra-processed foods, such as emulsifiers, artificial colorings, sweeteners, preservatives, thickening agents, anti-caking agents, you name it. And these chemicals are not real food. They are chemicals for a reason. And many of them have been linked to serious potential issues with human health. You don't believe me? Go research them. They're all, the databases are out there available. You can go to the CDC web database, National Institute of Health, World Health Organization, any of those databases, look up those chemicals, and you're going to see it's not hard to find. They're there. Okay. So these things are harmful. Eating a few times is going to make a difference? Probably not. Most likely not. But continuous chronic consumption of those things, you'll add up eventually. Usually people have the argument, well, so my grandfather was 105 years old and he had whatever he wanted to smoke. Good for him. You're not your grandfather. You have chronic disease. you're morbidly obese, you're type 2 diabetic, you have severely high blood pressure, and you have MS at the same time. Well, so you're not your grandfather, are you now? And I always tell people, don't compare yourself to other people. There's always outliers. There's always people who genetically can handle this, people who can handle alcohol and clear alcohol and metabolize alcohol extremely fast, extremely well in mega quantities, something that the average person will probably have to go to the ER. Just because that is the case doesn't mean you should do it, okay? But I can also promise you this, that if anybody's 105 years old, I guarantee you they didn't grow up in processed foods, or they did, or something very minimal, relatively speaking. So that argument doesn't hold well, okay? Always remember that, because I get that a lot. Number 3, we're going to go through is why they're harmful. Well, they're nutrient poor. Completely opposite of high nutrient dense foods. Ultra processed food are severely nutrient poor. That's why in certain things like cereals and breads, you actually see them adding synthetic vitamins to some degree to be able to counteract the damage, because they know it's there. Okay, there's a reason why they add those chemicals, synthetic vitamins and minerals back to that food, because they themselves know the effect if they don't. Okay, so when something is fortified, it's not because it's really good for your health. It's fortified so they can minimize the damage. Okay, so again, you really, really have to understand that extensive processing will strip away many, if not all, natural nutrients that are found in whole foods, such as vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and so forth. It's just part of the process. You cannot have processed food without removing the nutrients. Okay, so let's, for example, white flour, white bleach flour. It's another metabolic poison. It's horrible for you. And most processed foods are made with that. Okay, that's part of the mix. Well, how is that made? Well, we take the wheat kernel, whatever wheat that might be, and they'll take out the bran, which contains all the water-soluble vitamins. They'll take out the germ, which contains the fat-soluble vitamins, especially the vitamin E complexes. So also the bran contains the fiber. And now you're left with the endosperm, and that is nothing but pure starch. And then they grind that into flour. Then they go through a chemical process called bleaching. Okay, you can Google it. You can look it up what the bleaching process is. Okay, it's not something that is healthy. It's not good. So now you're left with a product that is completely devitalized of any kind of nutritional value. And it's very high glycemic, very high dense carbohydrates that mimics and turns the body to sugar very quickly, very efficiently. It will raise blood sugar. There's no fiber, there's no vitamins, there's no minerals, there's no fat soluble vitamins to be able to counteract and make that glycemic index normal and healthy like it was designed to do. But if you don't process the wheat like that, you can't have it to be shelf stable. So, perfect example, white flour. That is why a lot of times you might see it is fortified with thiamine and or iron for this reason, because they know the damaging effect that it can have. Not that it makes it okay or it's healthy, but at least you're not going to get the damage to that severe extent when everything is removed and nothing is added, at least synthetically back in. So this is why the nutrient poor aspect of those highly refined processed food is a problem. Okay, it will contribute to disease eventually. In natural health, ultimately, any kind of chronic disease is going to be the factor of one and or both things. And those things are nutrient deficiency or deficiencies and or some form of toxicity. Any chronic disease, doesn't matter how you swing it, when it all boils down, you're going to see a deficiency pattern and a toxicity pattern. The toxicity can be exogenous, can be endogenous, can be a combination of both, but regardless, it is. A nutrient deficiency will always, especially nowadays, be part of that pattern, okay? Let's go to number 4. So, fourth characteristic is, well, they displace healthier foods. When you go and you eat processed food, you're ingesting tremendous amount of calories in a very fast amount of time. And that satisfies a craving, that satisfies a hunger, direct hunger response. and therefore you're not eating, and therefore you're not going to eat any other healthy foods. And in addition to that, when you eat processed food, you lose the taste for true, wholesome, healthy food that does have a very high nutrient density, at least to some extent. And when that happens, you are getting the brunt of the processed food consumption, because the body signals hunger in an attempt to obtain missing nutrients. So when you're hungry, the body needs energy, and nature has designed that energy to be always complemented with some kind of micronutrient content, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and so forth. What happens is this leads to a cycle of overeating, yet undernourishing. That's why people that are morbidly obese, especially, they actually they're calorically overfed and nutritionally underfed, and they're literally starved. Another example, real quick, is a book called Starving America, and it was written by Alfred Waterson McCann. This is a reprint from a compilation of the original work. It was written in 1912, not 2012, 1912. Okay, again, it's called Starving of America. Read it; you'll really open your eyes, because these are problems that have been happening way back when, well over 100 years ago, and those people called it out down to the last fact. It was amazing. We have been warned from a long time ago that we're going to have a problem, and we have a problem. We have a big problem, and that is the chronic disease epidemic of this nation. It's absolutely staggering. And honestly, I'm not hopeful. I'm not hopeful at all. I wish I was, I'm not, because every year is getting worse and worse. And honestly, it seems like people just literally care less and less. Okay, they just don't want to hear it. Okay, but I pray this changes eventually. I really do, because something big is going to have to happen, and for people to wake up. Usually, there's the pattern with humanity. Something really has to get really bad for many people in order for something to happen. Personally, these foods should be absolutely outlawed. They should not be allowed to use whole foods. If you look at documents from the past, way long ago, you'll see that actually, as late as the 70s, there were acts actually that were trying to, or actually these processed foods, were labeled as imitation foods for a reason, because they were not real foods. Of course, people lobbied. You're talking, millions, if not billions of dollars that are at stake. And like anything else happens, gets swept to the table. The law gets overturned, gets renamed. And I believe in 78, if I'm not mistaken, a law was passed that you don't have to label those as imitation foods. They will just ride along with the real deal in the grocery store. And sure enough, they did a great job, because nowadays, anybody going in, they buy a processed cereal, some white bread that is obviously garbage, some, Western oil that is, highly induced, highly refined industrial seed oil. It's not even really oil. It's poisonous chemical, really. But right along with the meat and the eggs and the cheese and the vegetables and the fruits, and people think that is food. That's real food. So they've done a great job of really brainwashing people and getting used to those foods. And believe me, they're very, very profitable. So let's go to number 5 real quick. The fifth characteristic that makes those foods very harmful, and that is they have a profound impact on the body's hunger hormones, such as the ghrelin and the leptin hormones, which regulate your appetite and satiety, respectively. Look them up, ghrelin and leptin. What they do, how they do it. Not going to go into the biochemistry. Nobody really cares. That's really not the point. The point is that these foods have a massive impact, negative impact on those hormones. And that is why people cannot stop eating those foods, aside from the addiction. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's go to a big warehouse like Sam's, Costco, BJ's, and get one of the huge bundles of bananas. I think there's like 10 or 12, 15 even bananas per bundle. Try to eat the whole thing. I promise you will not be able to. Or go eat a bag of apples. Not going to happen. After the probably 4th, 5th, I don't know who knows, you're going to have a problem. Okay. Yet I can go across the other aisle, buy the big value potato chips, corn chips, and I can guarantee you, because I've done it back in the day myself, kill the whole bag in one sitting, and yet my stomach is full. This starting to look like I'm 9 months pregnant. Yet I'm still hungry and I still want to eat. I've done that with cheesecake. I've done that with the value boxes with Kit Kats, which I think that was like over 700 grams of sugar in one of those. Um, yeah, believe it or not, Dr. Alex did that back in the day when I first got to the United States and I tasted Twix and Kit Kat and the Kibler cookies. I thought I was on heaven. I mean, it was like I never tasted anything in my life. I couldn't believe it. And then I tasted cheesecake 2 years after that. And I was on cloud nine. I was, every time I ate that, I got high as a kite because it was amazing. It tasted immensely phenomenal. Well, guess what? When I got older, I can buy my own stuff. I used to buy those things and eat them to the point that I've gotten myself sick, literally. And it was hard for me to stop. It was extremely hard for me to stop. When I started to embark on the health and wellness journey and the fitness journey back in the mid-late 96, early 97, it took me 5 years to stop eating breads, white flour. It took me about 2.5, 3 years to stop eating sugar. Anything, Kit Kats, cookies, you name it. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I swear to you, because they're severely addictive. And I was not even raised on those foods. The first 13 years of my life, we lived in a communist country in Eastern Europe, which didn't have much. Meals, white flour, and sugar, but people had to make something. So those ultra processed, easily accessible, extremely cheap forms of sugar, those foods were not available. So luckily, I grew up in pretty steady, healthy diet overall of whole food, and this thing was just a treat. But when I got to the States and we were able to buy them because we were poor immigrants and they were so cheap, that's pretty much all we ate for a few years. It was amazing. Little did we know that we're gonna pay the price. Both my mother and father paid the price. In the immigrants community, there was always a joke that anybody who comes to the United States within a year, they'll be up 20 kilograms. Well, 20 kilograms is exactly 44 pounds. And that was no joke because, when you're immigrant, you're poor usually, very poor. Broke is a joke. And you go to outlets and, eat processed food. And to you, that's gold because it saves you a lot of money. Anyway, the big point here is that those things do alter the hunger hormones and they make those foods very addictive. And you keep eating because you're hungry, you're underfed, you're undernourished. So keep that in mind, okay? I want to talk about some of the health issues that are linked with the ultra-processed food real quick. One thing that has become interestingly evident is the detrimental impact of UPFs on our health. Nobody's going to argue that. A poor diet, heavily laden with UPFs, has been, without fail, by numerous studies identified as a leading global health risk, period. Linked to more deaths annually than tobacco, high blood pressure, and other health risks, literally. This accounting for over almost 30% of the total death toll worldwide. The consumption of those foods is associated with a host of adverse health outcomes, including, as I talked about, severe chronic inflammation, which chronic disease has, diabetes, obesity, cancers, you name it. It poses a significant risk to our immune system. And is known to damage the human gut microbiome. By the way, side note, same goes for cats and dogs. You talk to a permanent holistic, at least integrated vet, they're going to tell you that the cancers in dogs has skyrocketed, especially with those processed foods that they're fed. From our expertise in holistic medicine, I can tell you this, that we know that all these diseases and conditions are directly connected to concentric changes in a body's self-regulatory mechanism, just a fact. The big food corporations, they'll often, or pretty much always, deflect blame for the surging health crisis and obesity epidemic, suggesting that these issues stem from things like increased sedentary lifestyle. No, they don't. changes in behavior or a collective loss of appetite control among the population. I mean, stupid things. They have zero merit whatsoever. But the rise of these health issues, honestly, is directly due to ultra-processed foods, and research proves. Believe now we're going on the 7th, even 8th generation of that, and you're seeing. Look at the childhood diabetes and obesity epidemic. Look at the autism epidemic. I mean, you can't argue that. You just can't on any levels. You know, even when I came to the States, you know, I started noticing, the first thing I started noticing when I started school was how many fat kids there were. I used to ask my parents, like, well, how come there's so fat kids? Like, we don't know. We didn't have that in Europe. Okay. And also I noticed a lot of kids with like defects, you know, like a lot of like acne, just deformities. It was something that we just never really saw much at all in Eastern Europe. But anyway, you know, studies have definitely eliminated a stark correlation between the consumption of UPFs and the prevalence of, you know, serious health conditions, demonstrating that for every give or take 10% increase in intake of ultra processed foods, there's a corresponding 10 or so percent in the risk, okay, you know, of breast, prostate, colorectal, and oral cancers. These are studies out there, guys. These are studies that are, you know, published in prestige medical journals, and not something there's an opinion or, you know, make things that are made up. This relationship is known as a dose-dependent effect, of course, but showcasing a clear linear connection between the amount of UPF considered and the likelihood of developing these diseases. But it's not just cancer. For every incremental increase in the intake of those foods, there's a corresponding rise in the likelihood of obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and so forth. These are dose-dependent effects directly contradict, you know, the narrative that lifestyle factors alone are to blame for the widespread increase in the chronic illness and obesity epidemic rates that you are seeing. UPFs also have a significant impact on mental health. Okay, you have one study recently here linked the consumption of UPFs directly to almost over 50% higher risk of anxiety and depression, you know, with their regular and chronic consumptions. It is thought that the combined effects of these foods, one factor is decreased oxygen to the brain, impacts the balance of neurotransmitters, you know, subsequently leading to higher levels of depression and anxiety, which is very true. Okay, you just can't deny that. You see that. You know, I'm not going to go into my own testimony here, but, you know, same thing. I used to have a lot of, you know, anxiety and ADHD, not ADHD, but ADD, attention deficit disorder, you know, the depressive irritability and mood issue, panic attacks, and it was my diet. It was nothing else. When I fixed that, it all went away. So these are the 5 characteristics that, you know, make those foods very harmful, and we really have to sound the bell on that. Again, it's nothing new, but really start to think and start watching around you who is eating what. You'll be amazed if you start to notice and watch what you're eating and what other people are eating. You'll see the severe consumption rates of those foods, okay? So remember, they're designed to be addictive, okay? They contain harmful additives and chemicals. They're nutrient poor. They displace healthier foods. And, you know, they alter our hunger hormones, therefore altering our hunger response. So the evidence is clear. You know, they pose a severely serious, significant threat to our health. With their ability to manipulate our hunger signals, display nutritious foods, and introduce harmful chemicals into our diets, ultra-processed foods undermine our health, and with literally every bite. I mean, literally. And fortunately, there's a simple yet powerful solution. Intentionally returning to a diet filled with whole organic foods that come directly from earth, like just like a food should be. And that's what really food is called. Because the common underlying impact of UPFs manifests as an inflammation, if you consciously choose a diet that looks similar to what our ancestors ate, which is called natural non-inflammatory foods, you can steer clear of the pitfalls that are associated with UPFs and embrace a diet that is, you know, that promotes health as opposed to promotes disease. And, you know, healing will occur. You'll be amazed. When I work with people, one of the prerequisites is always, you will have to change your diet. There's no protocols, there's no supplements, there's no exercises, there's no, you know, other treatment options, if you want to call it. They're going to do it for you. If you don't address the diet, you will fail every single time. There's not a single person that any of my colleagues have ever worked with that had success, including myself, that have had success with addressing lifestyle, access to things like exercise, drinking pure water, taking supplements of the best kind, addressing stress, whatever else might be, but never addressing the food. Nobody's ever succeeded. And I cannot stress this enough, because it's a severe problem. And unless people wake up and they really realize the damaging effect of those food-like substances, frankenfoods, nothing's going to change, but it's going to continue to get worse. And again, we're in a dire situation. A lot of people way before me have really rung the bells over the decades, and seems like it has always, for the most part, fallen on deaf ears. So I'm really hoping that people do start to wake up and really pay attention, because food is literally medicine, and it is the most powerful aspect of healing, no matter what. When it comes to chronic disease, if you don't address the food, nothing else is going to change. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, I believe we are out of time. I try to keep those things to hopefully under 40-45 minutes. But, I just really urge you, or really beg you, plead with you, really address your diet. Stop eating processed foods of all kinds, and really experience freedom from this. And you'll be amazed at what happens. One common question I get is, well, if I can eat organic food, is it still worth it? Absolutely, it's worth it. As long as you eat whole food, it can be inorganic. You'd be millions of times better than eating ultra-processed foods. So just start. Just doesn't have to be perfect. It's a journey like anything else. You're going to go through a severe withdrawal. I promise you that. Be patient. You're going to fall 1,000 times. As long as you pick yourself back up, you're going to succeed. People always ask for a formula for success. There is not one. If anything close to that, it would be, as long as you don't give up, you'll succeed. You will get that eventually. Eventually things will click and you make it happen. You just got to start and keep going. Anyway, guys, again, this is DrPND, and we are doing an episode of Your Health Train. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and stay healthy and well, and we'll see you guys next time.